Hello! Today I'm going to be starting my journey into making Ciel's Robin dress from Black Butler. This is a dress I've wanted to make since I started cosplaying, and I think I'm finally ready. I hope. I'm going to start by showing my process of making the corset that will go underneath everything. So here is my mock-up. It doesn't fit my dress form very well because it's not exactly my size, but that's okay because the mock-up fits me, and that's what's important. I didn't bind the mock-up because I didn't feel it was very important to getting the right fit. Also, here's a skirt that's been on my dress form for literally like 2 months now and I still haven't hemmed it. This is the fabric I'm going to be using for the corset. It's basically white dots surrounded by pink, and since the dress is pink and white mostly, I thought it would look good. I did want to use a fabric that wasn't as stretchy as this one is. This one does have a little bit of stretch to it. However, I found an estate sale and all they were selling was these huge bolts of fabric, and I saw this and I thought it was very pretty, so I did go ahead and put a bid in on it and I won. And this is how big the bolt is, and I'm literally just using this for the corset, but this bolt was $8. I basically got all of the fabric I need for this costume for something like 20-30 bucks. I haven't really mathed it out because I got a lot of fabric that I don't need for this costume as well, but I probably got like 150, 175-ish yards of fabric for like 80 bucks. It's pretty crazy. And it takes a huge strain off of my wallet for this costume. So here I'm going to quickly iron the fabric and start marking out all of my pattern pieces. You're going to see me switch between a pen and tailor's chalk a couple of times while I try and figure out which one's the best to market. I ultimately decided a heat-sensitive pen was the best way to go. A heat-sensitive pen, basically you can erase the markings with heat, so if I mess up, iron over it, start again. The pattern I'm using is a pattern from Truly Victorian. It's the number 110 corset. It's an 1880s corset. I just really liked the shape, and when I decided on it, I was kind of half in the mind of, let's make it kind of historically accurate, and before I realized that this is not at all what a dress from the 1880s looks like. But I'd already bought the pattern, so still went with it. There are 12 pieces to this pattern, 6 for each side of the body. Now, I'm gonna be honest, cutting things out is the absolute worst part of sewing to me. I hate tracing patterns, I hate cutting it out, I just want to start putting it together and see it start coming together. But regardless of how bored I was, you can see my camera starting to move very quickly here, and in a couple of seconds, it is gonna fall right down. And this is where she knew. She fucked up. Anyway, let's back up a little bit, and remember this little spot right before my camera fell when I pulled out my phone and started recording something on my fabric? It wasn't that exciting, I just accidentally marked on it. But I don't know why this camera is so garbage under this lighting. Anyway, I'm just gonna finish marking out all of my pieces so I can cut them out, and oh, I guess I gotta fix my lighting rig again. I didn't glue it together, which is why it keeps falling, but man, I tell you what, it doesn't fall very often, but when I do, it's when I'm recording my first video for YouTube. Anyway, after I'm finished cutting out this fabric, I'm going to cut out the lining, and for that, I'm just using an unbleached canvas. So I now have all my pieces cut out, and next I get to harvest the busk out of my mock-up because I only bought one and I don't want to buy another one. I took a quick break, and then I turned around to go ahead and put my busk in, but someone is sleeping on my footpad. But I guess it's okay because she's cute. So here I was explaining that I'm going to be putting the busk in next. However, on my phone camera, I found out that my finger was conveniently directly over the microphone. But what I'm saying here is that I'm going to clip the fabrics together wrong sides together. Gonna lay the busk on top with the loops lined up with the edge of the fabric. I'm then going to trace the spaces in between the loops and then sew over all of those lines, skipping the spaces in between. So a little bit more about how I'm sewing it. Basically, I'm backstitching at the start of the seam. I'll backstitch again at the end of the first line, lift up my needle and presser foot, move the fabric so my needle lines up with the start of the next line, and then lower my needle and presser foot, back stitch again, sew until the end of that line, back stitch, and rinse and repeat until the end of the seam. So I've now sewn all the holes in place. I've inserted the busk and pinned it into place, and now I'm gonna sew it into place. And we have 1/2 of a busk inserted. So inserting the knob side is a little bit different. For this, I have to sew up the entire side first, flip it right side out, and then poke holes throughout the whole thing so I can stick the knob through, and then sew that into place. So now I have both halves of the busks put together, and as I was putting in the knob side, I have realized an issue. So here's the bottom, and the bottom is supposed to be about 1/2 inch above like the bottom of the corset, but the bottom of the busk is literally at the bottom of the corset. And I think this is an issue because I had originally placed it correctly, but the pink fabric stretched as I was sewing it, and I had to cut some off. And I think that's where my issue came in. This one is literally at the edge of the corset. At the top, it is about 1/2 inch away. So, and this is the same exact pattern I used for my mock-up, and my mock-up was totally fine. So this is an issue that I'm gonna deal with later, because boy, do I not feel like recutting all of this, taking everything out, and starting over. No one's gonna see it anyway. So here you can see me start pinning together all the rest of the pieces. I'm gonna start by lining up the notches between piece 1 and piece 2, and then I'm gonna start pinning out from that point, or clipping, because clips. Then you're gonna see me flip it over and start pinning on the next lining piece. And I do it the same exact way. I'm gonna line up the notches first and then clip from there outward. And then I'll sew it together with a 1/2 inch seam, and then repeat this 9 times. Now here's my cat Lucy, who is so desperate for attention that she started meowing at the bathroom door. There was no one in the bathroom, Lucy, who was going to pet you. But alas, she does it every single day. Here is another cat who decided to disturb me mere moments after I was done scolding Lucy. I know they look like the same cat, but I promise they are not. So now I'm going to start putting in the eyelets, although I did put 2 in before I started recording. I did end up having to cut the holes out. I used my awl to start it, but I ended up having to cut the holes bigger because the canvas just did not stretch enough for me to get the eyelets through so I could hammer them in place. If you're unaware of how to put eyelets in, the quick and dirty tutorial is you're supposed to poke a hole through the fabric where you're going to put your eyelets in, although as I said, I did end up having to cut it because my eyelets were too big to get through the canvas. Then grab the taller half of the eyelet and poke it through from the fashion side. So basically you can see the pink is the fashion side, I have it on the bottom, and I'm poking it through from the bottom. You're going to see me grab my awl. That's because the hole is still a little too small for the eyelet, so I'm going to use the awl to move the fibers around the eyelet so it fits through. Next, you grab the smaller washer and fit it over the other half of the eyelet that you've just pushed through your fabric. You're going to place the bottom in the little silver dish that comes with your setting kit. You're going to place the top hammering part through the top of the eyelets and hammer, hammer, hammer. If you didn't buy cheap eyelets like I did, then it should roll over very smoothly. However, my eyelets were cheap and they split. But that's okay, no one's ever going to see them. And then you're just going to continue on with the other, 50,000 eyelets that you need to put on. So a couple days later, I finished putting in all of my eyelets and started sewing on the top binding and didn't record it because I forgot. The next step is just to insert all of the boning and then bind the bottom edge closed. I'm going to be using the boning that's in my mock-up because it's already cut to the right size and I'm never going to wear the mock-up again. So I'm going to quickly run through how I'm going to fix, in quotes, fix, the busk situation. So as I'm binding, which is really the only issue with the busk being too low, when I'm binding, I am machine sewing all the way up. I don't know if you can even see that. I'm machine sewing all the way up as close as I can to the busk. And then I'm going to hand sew this last little bit in place, only catching the top fabric instead of sewing all the way through. And then when I flip this over to the other side, I'll sew the other side down the same way, only catching through the lining, which is canvas, so it's much more difficult and looks a little more like this. Very sloppy, but it's okay because no one's ever gonna see it because it's the lining. And then as soon as I'm finished hand sewing this, flipping it over and sewing that down, it will be done. And I didn't record any of the binding like the professional I am. But here you can see the completed corset on my dress form. Still doesn't fit my dress form. I'm still bigger than my dress form. That's okay. I am very pleased with how this came out. It is the first corset I've ever made, and I think given that, it came out very well. Here you can see it doesn't quite line up on the bottom. One side is a little bit longer than the other, even though it lines up on top. But overall, I am very happy with how this came out. I think it's gorgeous. I love the fabric I used, even though it was annoying to work with because it really liked to stretch. But anyway, that is part 1 of my making of Ciel's Robin dress. Next up is the hoop skirt, which I have also never made before.